all profit is value extraction. And that means that all profit is theft from you.
Corporate America is on welfare, and we've got to get them off welfare.
Last words on my lips. I am a revolutionary, and you're gonna have to keep on saying that.
And what's that for? Okay, I think we are recording now. Cool.
Yeah, welcome to Cars and Comrades, the first Anarcho-Stalinist automotive podcast. where we toe the Anarcho-Stalinist party line.
That's the ideology that you just made up 5 minutes ago, right?
Yeah, well, I'm a convert from Marxist-Bidenism.
Off to a great start.
I'm really
Anarcho-Stalinism. That's it's the policies of Stalin, but without the well thought out planning.
Yeah,
it's Stalin minus the science. It's mostly about vibes.
The mortal science.
The highly mortal science. Okay, for real though, welcome to Cars and Comrades, the podcast that I love to derail. I'm your host for the day, Brandon. Here with me are Zach, Bryant, and Connor, and we're going to do a quick intro here before we get right into the potatoes of the episode. What's everybody worked on this week? Let's start with you, Zach.
Oh man, I got big news. I'm glad you started with me. I finally got
I lost your softball there, bud.
Oh yeah, just gonna knock this one right out. I finally got my Audi S4 running that has been non-operational for close to 5 years. Drove. Thank you. Save your applause. It drove, it ripped donuts in the snow. It was awesome. It took me every waking second that I had over the past week. But it's done and it's driving.
Nice.
So
that is cause for celebration.
Fucking sweet.
Yeah, congratulations.
So when you say you went and ripped donuts in the snow, was this like 2 minutes or were you fucking around for like an hour having fun?
This was a real quick rip. This is the first time the clutch and flywheel have mated under power. So this was a very, very quick little spin. Didn't want to give it too much right off the bat. Mainly just a
didn't want to tempt fate. I feel you.
Yeah, exactly. I was a little nervous, so I took it on a nice leisure stroll out of the neighborhood into a parking lot nearby, and tried to rip a donut there, but it was not a great spot. There's a lot of light poles and curbs, so I just came back into the neighborhood and ripped a couple around the cul-de-sac, and then drove it straight into the garage because I knew the cops were going to be there soon.
Nice.
You know, under Anarcho-Stalinism, we like the cops.
Okay.
All right. Enough out of
I'm no longer an Anarcho-Stalinist.
Well, only the secret cops.
Yeah. I'm not with this.
Well, I mean, not the cops. We're obviously going to rename them the KGB.
I'm going back to Marxist-Bidenism. That makes more sense to me.
Hold on. The horizontally organized KGB.
Yes. Yes. The ad hoc KGB.
Funny you say that. Ad hoc is actually going to be a group that we discussed today.
Oh, cool. Okay.
What about you, Bryant? Did you accomplish anything in the shop this week?
Shop? What shop?
Did you accomplish anything wherever your car is located?
Yeah.
Or moped?
Sort of. yesterday I put the battery back in my MR2 and pumped up the tires that were a little low, and then pulled the fuel injection fuse to crank it over and get oil pressure a couple times, and then got it to start, blew all the smoke out, let it run for a while, and then it started snowing. So I will fix the turn signals hopefully tonight or tomorrow, if I have time for that and it doesn't snow again. So we'll see about that. But yeah, I also got a notice in the mail saying I need to get it emissions tested. So that's putting, a little bit of impetus or, motivation to get things done. So we'll see how far that carries me. But yeah, I could drive it today, if I just stick my arm out the window and do turn signals that way. But it's winter. I don't want to.
Awfully cold for that, man.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Plus, I don't think anybody actually knows what the hand signals mean anymore. I'm pretty sure no one's going to get what you're doing.
I mean, having ridden my bike on public roads, I can vouch for that. People don't know what the fuck that means.
People don't know what it means when you flash your headlights at them either. Like, people don't get it. It's like, there's a cop there. Slow down. I'm trying to help you. No one knows. They're just, ooh.
Or people just driving with their headlights off.
Where I'm from, people don't even know what turn signals are. So,
Yeah, I mean, if I had a BMW, this wouldn't be a problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I only recently learned BMWs have turn signal switches. I've never seen someone use one.
So,
what about you, Connor? What'd you work on?
I didn't work on anything.
Makes the segment brief.
Yeah, well, the 350Z at the shop, and I'm trying not to call every week to be like, hey, how's it going? So it's gonna be there for a good couple months, and I'm trying not to call too often.
One time I thought I was being super chill by not harassing my mechanic all the time, and then after 3 months, I was just like, hey, is there any fucking word on that engine swap? And he's like, yeah, I've been waiting for you to get in touch with me to give me money so I can move on to the next step. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah, I'm not letting it lapse that long, but
Well, he was doing me a solid. I was being the guy that he worked on cheap when they weren't busy with something else, so I didn't want to harass him too much.
Yep.
But had no idea that they had ceased work for 2 months because I owed them money and they were just patiently waiting on me.
Yeah, see, if everybody's too patient, that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm very, very patient.
Yeah. Yep. So that makes sense. Yeah, so that's a long-term thing. I am looking into finding an audio shop to figure out my sound system, because that's going to come pretty much right as soon as the engine's rebuilt. I'm going to tackle that one, because I have been driving around with like dog shit sound and a sub that like keeps going, cutting out and stuff. Like, it's just, I got a portable speaker that I've been using in the car for like over a year now.
Yeah, and if you're drift racing, you 100% need to be able to really crank Eye of the Tiger on repeat for hours.
You have no idea how fucking true that is. When I'm drifting, I
really didn't have any idea how true that was.
Yeah, no, I blast. Well, not Eye of the Tiger. I couldn't handle that. But like Irish folk music, whatever I'm feeling that day, just that's a fun one because people are like, "What the fuck is happening right now?"
I love that shit. We're on the same page. Dope. But no, specifically for race purposes, it needs to be Eye of the Tiger, so you are wrong.
Oh,
you're right, but you're still wrong.
Okay, sure.
The rules under Anarcho-Stalinism are very...
That's the party line. Okay, got it.
Yes.
So there's that, and then the Camaro is like just snowed in at my dad's house, and it has been for a while. I wanted to go get it to like fuck around with it and try and get this thing ready for emissions, but the clock is starting to run down, and I'm starting to be like, okay, how much time do I really have to tackle this? I think I'm just going to end up having to take that to the shop and, make it fucking pass. Because, I was hoping to get a chance to look at it myself, but I've looked at it a couple times and just haven't made any progress on it. I know kind of what I'm looking for, but like, it is just, I'm looking for this line for emission for like the evap system, and I don't know where it is. It's just unplugged, and I can't find a replacement part for it. So, might just leave it with a professional so that I don't have to go through the whole, out of date emissions test and all that, because that's a pain in the ass. So
This is
we'll see.
on the Camaro.
But that's where I'm at.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just like
on my end, the only thing I accomplished this week was converting my Cutlass over to a non-running vehicle. I took it for a brief drive and somehow discovered that my alternator, which has yet to make it through a full tank of gas, suddenly doesn't work anymore. I fucking put the thing on like 2 weeks ago, 3, and it suddenly just isn't charging anything. So I had to drive home with my headlights off in the dark for a little bit of the drive just to keep it from draining my fucking battery. Good times.
But you made it home at least, right?
Oh yeah, my battery was at 10.5 volts when I made it home, as opposed to the 12.8 it should be.
Real quick before we move on, I think I told Zach about this, but there's this band from Barcelona, from Catalonia, called El Pony Pisador, that does lots of sea shanties and Irish folk music that I've been listening to a lot this week. They're pretty cool. So check them out. What
was the name of it again?
El Pony Pisador. I think it means like a stomping pony. And they have like songs. I will
look into that.
Yeah, they have like songs in Catalan. They have like Irish folk songs. They have like bluegrass and sea shanties. A lot of sea shanties. So pretty fun stuff.
That's dope. Yeah, I just like, I like drifting to like ridiculous music that just like doesn't quite fit. Like it's fun. I don't know why. It's a thing that I like doing.
Definitely.
For a while, the only thing I would listen to in my Cutlass was classic rock or like early 90s hip hop.
Nice. I feel like both of those are kind of fitting though.
For like, if you saw the interior of my Cutlass, which is like long pile 2-tone fur and like metal flake vinyl and like Zarape blankets, it works. Yeah. Like I definitely wanted something that was very like, early 90s East LA vibes. So a lot of Cypress Hill in that car.
Nice.
Yeah, I've actually thought about doing custom seat covers with actual embroidered pot leaves on the headrest, but
that's probable cause right there.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we have listeners, they haven't seen me, but one look at me is probable cause. I look like a middle-aged squatter, so.
Yeah, we can all attest to that. He's telling the truth.
Yeah. All right. So, do we want to move on to the topic for the week?
Yeah, I think you're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
A recap or something, right?
Oh yeah, I'm going to recap it. Fucking be patient, Brian.
Sorry.
Jesus fucking Christ.
See, I was just projecting because I forget things a lot, so I was just reminding you.
You're catching me on like the first well-rested day that we've recorded, possibly ever. So I'm feeling it today. I'm well rested. I got a little bit of wild turkey in me. I'm good to go.
Sorry, ever.
But like an actual little bit, not like the one time we tried to record and I was blackout drunk.
Yeah.
All right. So where we left off on Drum Part 1, or really like the Revolutionary Union movement in Detroit Part 1, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what we'll fucking call this shit. We went through the early formations, like sort of the climate of Detroit being a very tumultuous city, having like some major uprisings, and how that led to the formation of the first Revolutionary Union movement, the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, and what their problems were, their objections with the UAW, and the UAW not listening to people's complaints about safety concerns, racial issues, so on and so forth. I believe we got into the expansion into the Eldon Avenue plant, the LRUM, which was actually, I believe that was the single biggest Revolutionary Union movement in a single shop there for a little bit. And when we left off, this is one thing I did want to touch on. I talked about the case of Jordan Sims, and I don't have everything in front of me to clear it up because, man, when you're talking about like specific union elections that happened in the late 1960s, it's hard to find information, and when I do, I forget to write it down. But the gist of it is that Jordan Sims was a radical, albeit maybe not like Marxist-Leninist sort of radical union leader. He did get elected properly. I had like kind of confused his specific case with some other ones, but it kind of doesn't matter. It does in a very specific sense, but the gist of it was even union elections had a tendency to be contentious. Like I mentioned, the one case where somebody like came over and prevented people within drum or within the union itself or something, prevented them from counting, like being in the room while ballots were counted, and they had to like raid the shop and everything. That was a case that actually happened. It was a different case than the Jordan Sims guy, and really he was a big figure in certain parts of the story, but really a small figure in the grand scheme of things, because I can find very little information about him. And I believe where I left off was leading into the actual founding of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. So that's where we're going to pick up. And any questions so far? You're getting you guys back up to speed on this.
Not for me.
No, that all makes sense.
All right. So where we leave off is finally there are enough revolutionary union movements that they form the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. That happened in June 1969. And by this point, we had revolutionary union movements across, it wasn't even purely automotive at this point. It was across a wide array of trades. Some of the bigger ones were the Ford Revolutionary Union Movement, Cadillac Revolutionary Union Movement, UPRUM, which was the U.S. Post Office Revolutionary Union Movement, and HRUM, the Healthcare Workers Revolutionary Union Movement.
So this was all centered around. So all these revolutionary union movements were all centered around like Detroit, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty distinctly Detroit phenomenon.
So it pretty much started with like, the Dodge Revolutionary Workers, whatever. But then people in their own communities talking about it, I assume, led to other industries kind of having the similar movements.
Yeah, one of the cool things I learned since we last recorded, and this isn't really new information as much as it is like feeling out the overall sort of attitude and perception in the community of a lot of these things. And while there was clearly contention even at the time, it looks like at the very beginning, these movements were viewed very favorably. Like a lot of folks maybe had issues with how radical they were, or their tendency towards alienating certain demographics, be it white people or even older black people that they didn't feel like were revolutionary enough, that stood somewhat at odds with the general perception that they were doing good things within the community. So that's something I'll get into a little bit more. But yeah, these RUMs, they were initially viewed as something that was effective and for the people, for the workers, very much oriented around the ordinary worker on the factory floor, which actually somewhat leads to the dissolution of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, which we're not going to get into quite yet because I'm just getting into the founding of that league. But I mean, it's a relatively short-lived story. It formed in '69 and it was over by '71, but I can't even say necessarily what it did, but generally the overall perception of the league was a positive one, I think, at least in its inception.
So these revolutionary union movements were happening where there was already union representation. Was it like the UAW was already in the plant representing workers, and these were cropping up kind of in opposition to them in plants where the UAW was already existing, or whatever other union?
Yeah, the UAW was viewed by a lot of folks as kind of complicit with management at this point.
Oh, probably rightly so, I would think. So, like, were the members of these unions, like, they were actually members of, like, the UAW or some other not revolutionary union who were also part of the revolutionary unions?
So you got to figure, 1967 had some very 2020 vibes. Everybody was pissed off. There was a lot of social upheaval. And so it created fertile grounds for these revolutionary union movements. So when you had people who were already dealing with massive social unrest on like an absolutely enormous scale, and then they get to work and they're filing safety complaints left and right, and the union's just like, yeah, we'll take care of it, but nothing ever happens. And
Yeah, it's just an extension of what was already going on in the
yeah,
social sphere
the
anyway.
big
Okay.
complaints were that anything, any complaints formally filed in regards to safety were either ignored or kind of put on the back burner. Like, yeah, we'll take care of that later, or you can do that, but also we're not going to lighten your workload, so you have no time to do that. A little bit of a pocket veto there, sort of. And the other thing was that these plants were becoming more and more integrated. In some of the later cases, I've heard that some departments within some of the plants were reaching 70 and 80, 90% black workers, and they still felt very underrepresented, either because there was relatively few black people who were foremen or union reps or anything like that, or just the fact that a lot of those departments that were predominantly black or Arabic or any other like minorities or anything were the most dangerous or like monotonous menial tasks. They were just the shittiest jobs that you could get, and they were never really allowed to move out of them. They were blocked anytime they tried to gain skills so that they could move up into the other departments. They were just given shit work, and everybody knew why.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes sense. And the union's not, obviously, they don't give a shit. They're there to represent mostly white workers. They understand that, like, we'll do the bare minimum for our non-white members, but really they're just paying dues and kind of propping up the union. But the union's kind of not giving back, it sounds like.
see the sort of vibe that I got was less that like the UAW was for the white workers and didn't give a shit about black work. There was definitely times where that was true. When you had rank and file union members, I'm sure there were people who were very progressive versus straight up like documented KKK members who were in the union ranks. But they had the advantage of being, a bunch of white folks in power who were able to comfortably say, we're helping you, but we're gonna get there later. Like we're working towards something, and that's an easy thing to say when you're not the one who's getting maimed and murdered at work every day.
Yeah.
When
that makes sense.
So like, even if the union felt like they were trying to represent everybody, they were just doing an absolute dog shit job of it. So once the idea of the revolutionary union sort of came into the public consciousness, it seems like it spread really fast. Maybe a little bit burning too bright kind of scenario. But there were so many of them at this point that was what provoked the founding of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. This was an attempt to bring together all of the different revolutionary union movements under one big umbrella.
So were conditions similar in like the healthcare and postal service jobs? Was it similar? They were in unions that were ignoring their problems?
So if I remember correctly, this was around the time when there was some weird upheaval in the postal union. So I've got no fucking clue what was going on there, and I could not find almost any. Like, I found mentions of Uprum, Hrum, and Newrum, which was the newspaper workers, but man, I did not find any details about them at all.
Okay.
So
we just know that they were there, they were part of it, but they weren't.
I didn't look super hard because I was specifically focused on the automotive aspect of it, since we are an anarcho-Stalinist podcast about cars. I'm not going to let that go, guys. I love it.
Great.
I will beat a dead horse. I am not afraid. But no, yeah, I couldn't find anything at a glance about those. I'm sure that I could dig around and find something, but I don't think that they were a huge contingent of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers.
Okay.
And if they were, they're not relevant to our car podcast.
Fair enough.
Makes sense.
I'm going to blame my lack of research on that.
I love it.
Mindedness.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, this isn't my fault. It's your fault. All right. So the League of Revolutionary Black Workers had like an executive committee. It was a 7-man board of drum members and then 3 others who had various roles throughout the union movement. A lot of them were like the same people who were founding members of drum. Like the big names here to remember are Ken Cockrell and Chuck Wooten. I can't remember. I don't think I actually got into either of these guys too in depth last week, but Ken Cockrell is, for the remainder of his life in Detroit, going to be a name worth remembering. So he was actually a lawyer. He went and, I think, from Wayne State, got his degree in law, and immediately sort of became the representative for drum. He was known to be the intellectual amongst the group and sort of the one responsible for keeping everyone out of jail. He was, by all accounts that I can find, both an excellent lawyer, like genuinely really good at his job, was really trying to do positive things for the community. Like any case where the case I discussed where the guy came to work and killed the 2 foremen and job setter. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, and I don't feel like going through my notes for it, but he at the very least helped on that case, or like was known to discuss it. I couldn't find a lot of specifics, but I think he worked on that case. And, you know, like, I'll get into it, but this guy becomes a long-standing, like, member of just the Detroit political scene. He established league rules for investigating any new members. You know, you didn't just join drum and everybody welcome you with open arms. You know, Cockrell was the one who said, no, let's make sure this guy's not a fucking cop. Like,
smart, really smart. I mean,
it
really,
wasn't
really smart.
foolproof as it's never gonna be, but he did at least have the forethought to recognize that they were doing something that higher ups were not going to be approving of. He even I don't know what repercussions there were, but he was very discouraging of even people using inflammatory rhetoric. Anybody like walking in trying to stir up shit, you were sort of immediately viewed as maybe a bit of an agent provocateur. They didn't put up with that shit. They weren't trying to start shit. They were trying to respond to the shit that the workplace was putting upon them.
You know, that reminds me a little bit of, I guess some new evidence came out recently with the murder of Fred Hampton, basically the FBI's involvement with that. And one of the FBI's strategies back in the day was to try and get informants to join as early as possible into any radical organization, so that basically they wouldn't be suspect because they got in on the ground floor. And that's what they did with the Chicago Black Panthers. And I wonder if maybe they did this with drum also, but I don't know.
Because this is sort of a smaller topic, I didn't find a whole lot about specific instances of FBI or police infiltration. I found some like sort of passing mentions of it for the police or for like management. I do not know to what extent the FBI got involved. Fuck, I wonder if like I've never had to file a FOIA request, but I wonder if I dug around if I could find something about that. Because I would be extremely surprised if the FBI did not have their fucking any involvement in this. That would for this era, that does not match their MO.
At the very least, I would assume that they would have an eye on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty aggressive back then. Like, you know, even if it's small, I mean, especially something like this, it sounds like it was spreading. And I feel like we can recognize even today, you look at like Bessemer, Alabama, where there's one single Amazon warehouse that might unionize, and they are pulling out all the fucking stops.
Yep.
Jeff Bezos is doing fucking everything to stop it. It's not small to them. It's not small to bosses, and it's not small to cops. For even today, you know,
We're
today
going
you're
off rails right here. But since you brought up fucking Bessemer and Bezos, did you hear the same week that Bezos decided to step down as like the head of Amazon, it came out that Amazon like delivery drivers had like tens of millions of dollars stolen from them by Amazon.
Yeah, I think it was like 67 million
Jesus.
stolen
Yeah.
from them.
I didn't hear that.
No,
I've seen a lot of speculation that Bezos stepped down specifically to try and maybe take some light off of that.
So here's the other thing, by the way. So for any listeners who like maybe heard this and like don't fully understand what's going on, which I can't say I fully understand because I'm about to cite some stuff, but I don't remember the actual fucking title he's going to have. Jeff Bezos is not actually stepping down. What he's doing is he's stepping down from specifically CEO. He is still going to be like the head of the board for in charge of the CEO. So like he's going to have a more powerful position within Amazon now. So he's still going to own a huge majority share. He's still going to be hugely powerful on the board. He's just going to be subject to less media scrutiny because he's not the CEO. I'm not in control. Boo boo. I don't know nothing. Even though he is in fact going to have much more power now. So it's a perfect storm for him. Less media
He
scrutiny.
got tired of being the big bald face of Amazon, and now he just wants all the power with none of the media scrutiny.
All the power, all the money, and less work. Yeah, Jeff Bezos is winning right now. Everything is coming up Bezos. And unfortunately, we're going to hear a lot less about him going forward. So that is pretty disappointing, actually.
Nah, fuck that. I'm going to rail against bozos until I fucking die.
We will. We will on this podcast, us anarcho-Stalinists. We will steadfastly hold the party line against Jeff Bezos.
What sucks for me personally is if I yell loudly and angrily enough about Bezos and they decide to do something about it, I have such a long and well-established history of mental illness that making it look like suicide is going to be so easy.
Yeah. And a couple other little things about Amazon. I don't know if you remember that guy last year who was trying to organize his warehouse in, I think, New Jersey or New York.
New York, I think.
Yeah, to have better safety protocols for COVID. And Jeff Bezos personally went into a meeting and said, like, how can we discredit this guy and get rid of him? And they did. They trumped up some charges and fired the guy. And then with that plant or warehouse or whatever in Alabama, they talked to like the mayor or the city council or someone and got them to change the timing of the traffic lights at the entry and exit of that warehouse to make it so that it was harder for people to pass out leaflets for unionization calls.
Yeah, I know Kim Kelly was reporting on that, and when I heard her talking about it, she was saying it was speculative, but it has since been confirmed.
Yeah,
that
it was confirmed like last week. They were talking about it on Means Morning News.
Yeah, they were saying. Yeah, I think Kim Kelly was actually on Means Morning News at some point discussing it. I don't know if y'all are familiar with her. She's doing really great work on a lot of labor issues. And also, I just knew her back when I lived in Philly, and she used to like party at my house with a bunch of folks. So that's cool. Small world.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Little personal connection there.
I didn't know her super well, but she was always super rad. Super big metalhead. That's how she got into journalism, was reporting on like metal bands and shit. Super nice person.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's not familiar with what I mentioned before about like Amazon stealing like $60-something million from its delivery drivers, was they had a certain type of delivery driver. They were using personal vehicles and they were getting paid something like $18 an hour plus tips. But what Amazon did was pocket the tips or under report the tips. So the 67 million was them skimming off of the top from tips and then folding that back into the hourly. So it looked like people weren't tipping as well, but they were making their hourly wage plus tips. The tips amount was just lower than it was supposed to be by like a fairly significant amount.
Yep.
Because poor old Amazon just couldn't afford to pay those workers that much money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, kind of more back on topic. All that to say, they give a shit. They absolutely give a shit. They have always given a shit. The richest, most powerful man in the world is going after like us, individual hourly fucking workers when they speak too loud. So to me, the thought that, somebody wasn't having a major eye on all these revolutionary union movements, especially given, this was at the time during, some kind of a Red Scare. People were they thought, oh, the communists were here and we're going to become the Soviet Union. So revolutionary union movement is a terrifying thing for anyone who's against.
Yeah, anyone who
that
was
to hear.
concerned that within this organization there was communists, they were correct. These guys were straight up Marxist-Leninists. Like,
Yeah.
my general vibe is that maybe they weren't the most like educated on the matter, because a lot of the stuff doesn't seem to quite track with strict Marxist-Leninist immortal science. But they were doing their thing based on those principles. It was fucking solid.
I don't want to like derail the conversation, but a part of me is wondering maybe
keep going.
if you happen to know kind of the difference between what might constitute a Marxist-Leninist union approach versus like a syndicalist type of approach, because my understanding was always that the anarcho-syndicalists was always like a strategy of using revolutionary unions to build power from the bottom up.
Dude, it's funny that you bring that up without having talked to me about it before, because my big criticism of like all of their literature, they were outwardly Marxist-Leninist, but everything that they were doing really did strike me as anarcho-syndicalist.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not the only one. Yeah.
It definitely has those vibes. I think that like my overall impression was that some of the higher ups maybe had some distinct tendencies that they were into, but a lot of this, and I don't know this officially, but it kind of seemed like if you had even remotely radical tendencies, you just sort of got folded into the ranks, because
which makes sense. This
100%.
is kind of a natural approach to approaching the issues in the workplace directly. Like, yeah, you call yourself a Marxist-Leninist, but in this case, the strategy called for is a syndicalist strategy. Like, you can believe in a party, you can believe in all kinds of things, but in terms of addressing these specific issues, this seems like this is the natural approach. So it's not necessarily like, oh, we're ideologically pure. It's just these are the problems. Here's the solution. Here's what we're going to go with. It feels natural to me.
Yeah,
which I think is really cool.
I think that is a pretty solid assessment. Yeah. So, like, getting back to the League, pretty much immediately, like, after the formation of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, I don't want to say it was a split, but there were two predominant attitudes of in-plant organizing, a la what Drum and LRUM and all of the other rumps had already been doing, where they stuck to a pretty, like, on the ground, just worrying about the workers in the plants. It never had... These people didn't have desires to grow into this big grassroots organization. They really just wanted to be the faction within the union who was fighting for what they believed in. And then there were other people who had bigger ideas. They wanted to expand the RUMs to be more community-based organization. And that gets more into what you were talking about, like when you're organizing the community. And they did have beliefs about like having a black revolutionary vanguard party. So they weren't strictly syndicalists, as I kind of made it sound. They did have distinct like Leninist tendencies. But my impression of the overall vibe was it was very syndicalist, just not in name.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of blurry lines there, to be honest. Like in terms of the broader left, I think the lines are a lot blurrier than a lot of people think. There's strategies, there's ideologies, and there's a lot of crossover between them.
Yeah. And, the two different styles of organizing that different people were trying to approach, that's what causes early conflict within the ranks of the League. Because you had some people who really just wanted this to be a strictly grassroots in-plant organization. And there were some people who were already thinking about expanding this to like a national level.
Yeah.
So yeah, by within a year of the foundation of the League, you can kind of already start to see the decline. First of all, they had to start raising money. Like, I'm not actually 100% sure about how the local rums were doing like any fundraising to support the stuff they had going on, because that was, as is with sort of any leftist organization, you tend to be looking out for the poor and downtrodden, which are not your best financial base. So they,
Nope.
from very early on, were having difficulty raising money for strike funds and stuff like that. And so that was sort of seen as something that the League needed to try and combat. So there was a conference in Detroit called the Black Economic Development Conference. And before I get into that too much, we're going to introduce a character named James Foreman. He was a character that I really can't quite fucking figure out in this story. On the whole, a positive, for sure. He was a big organizer with SNCC early on. Y'all familiar with SNCC, right? The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've come across it a couple times. I don't know a full like detailed history of the organization, but I know that some pretty well-known folks came out of organizing with them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So this dude, James Foreman, I don't think he was one of the foundational members of SNCC, but he was a very early member. He had a brief stint as the Black Panther Party Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was that, I think, for like 6 months. He was brought into the Revolutionary Union movement and the League because he was a smart dude, educated, a lot of organizing experience. Just from working with SNCC, he had ties across the entire fucking country to different organizations. He did organizing sort of parallel to MLK in Alabama. Like I read about him doing work in Selma and other areas in Alabama, but that also kind of got him a little bit of flack because he didn't always really agree with MLK's tactics. He opposed top-down leadership. He wanted it to be more community organized, grassroots sort of. He also was pretty like not that it like comes to a head with him, but he was comfortable with violent protest. He understood the role that violence played in a movement and was critical of MLK's condemnation of violence. This dude is kind of a big part of the end of the League. It probably would have ended in his absence, but he definitely didn't slow the process down any. And like as a thing that I'm going to get into later about how a lot of these organizers kind of became a little bougie. This dude's son is now a fucking professor of law at Yale. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe that's good, but I have a feeling that it's probably not.
It probably is both. I like actually. I'm going to get into that in a little bit because I have a little bit to say about how some of that goes. But anyway, yeah. I bring this dude specifically. I bring him up specifically because he had something that he called the Black Manifesto. So at the Black Economic Development Conference, he got up and read the Black Manifesto, which was almost hilarious. It was one of their two attempts at like large scale fundraising, except that his was entirely just shaming white people into paying reparations. It was 100% like, hey, churches and synagogues, y'all have been complicit in this shit for a whole bunch of years, so we demand $500 million. And this is not $500 million adjusted. Like, this was 1970 $500 million.
That's a bold ask, I guess.
I mean, he wasn't exactly wrong, but that probably didn't have a very good, chances of success, unfortunately.
I saw mixed stuff about the number that they got. They got, I think, less than or around $100,000 from various churches, well short of their $500 million goal. But like worth noting is that it was a big ask, and like their tactics at this point were a little dodgy. Like I vaguely recalled something about maybe them sending some strongmen to coerce religious leaders out of money.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I don't think that they ever actually got violent. I think that they did rely a little bit on some intimidation. But here's some of the stuff that they wanted the money for, because it wasn't just a vague demand of like, give us money because you owe us or we deserve it or something. I believe $200 million of it was earmarked for a land bank. So they wanted to like actually have a huge, like invest huge amounts of money into land that they could distribute amongst people who needed it, amongst union members or whoever. They had plans for a job skills training program, again, for black people, publishing ventures in, dude, it was like something like half a dozen different cities, and then an enormous amount for a black labor strike fund so that the revolutionary union movements could go about their business and strike when need be without having like the economic pressure applied that a strike is always going to do. A lot of people did not care for this approach. They thought that it was sort of relying too much on handouts, which, on the one sense it is, but on the other sense it's kind of fucking money owed. Like when you have...
Yeah, I mean, really, especially if they did the math and said, here's how much we need for this, here's how much we need for that. And
they did do the math. It was pennies to the person, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty legit. I feel like it is money owed, and it's like, well, they're not wrong. They really weren't, and they were going to do something with it. They had a plan. I'm not against that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it was in 69 or 70. Like, it was still, like, back then they were still seeing it as what I have. It's the best model that I've ever seen of how to go about reparations. Like, maybe you can't afford to just give every individual these large lump sums, but they wanted to go in and
build something,
build the community. Like, build, like, I don't know. I'm sort of getting caught up with myself, but yeah, like
personally, no, I agree. I think it's a good model because
it was a great model, and really, like, I won't condemn anything about the model that they're using. Like, that tactic was a little bit iffy because it did rely so much on getting money from white
already
guild.
Yeah, already a pretty not sympathetic group of people. You know what I mean? It's like
people called them out openly, but a lot of people did give them money.
Yeah.
But there was another thing that they were referring to as the international black appeal, and that was a more of a self-reliance view. It was the alternative to the Black Manifesto, and that was, I think it was every worker who was a member of the organization was, and they, at this point they're trying to expand the organization to millions. Like, they're wanting to get every black worker in America on board with this. And if they can do that, actually, I say in America, it was an international approach. They just wanted black workers in general to come together. And it was something like, if every worker gives $1, then their income was going to be, millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And that was going to be their other resource pool. And it was effectively union dues. It was, you pay $1 into the rum fund, and we're going to do all this fucking wild shit for you. And it was...
That also seems like a very good approach.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot imagine a better approach. The only problem is that, like, even though these people had union jobs, there's constant discussion about the economic struggles that they were having. There was one specific instance where, Dodge was bragging about how everybody in their plant by the end of the year was going to be making $4 an hour, which, at the time was a good wage. Except that by all accounts, not a single person in the shop at any point was at $4 an hour. I think the closest they came was like $3.90 something. And like, Dodge was out there saying this was going to be the average wage. And then a lot of people were like, I don't know, dude, I'm making $2.50. So fuck you. It was a classic rich person move. If you claim that you're going to do something, a lot of people just aren't going to report the fact that you didn't. So you get a lot of positive press with none of the backlash.
Kind of like what Elon Musk does.
Yep, I see it every day, and I hate it.
Dude, that was Trump's whole fucking MO, his whole career. Like,
yeah.
You can, like... Dude, my fucking coworkers love to be like, oh, did you hear Trump's going to give his salary from being president for the year to this charity? And it's like, yeah, find me the document when he actually does that. Because he don't. You don't do that.
Well, I mean, Biden's been walking back his campaign promises too, like,
and that's why I abandoned Marxism
angrily. And then he gets angry. He's like, "How dare you bring that up?
Yeah.
I didn't. How dare you remind me how I said $2,000 checks? How you fucking asshole? What do you love,
you didn't
Trump?"
Read and you're like, the lines. It was $1,400 the whole time. At no point did I ever say I was giving you more than $1,200. I don't know why you thought that You even deserve more than the $800 that we're giving you.
Yeah.
But if you can't settle for this $600, then you don't even deserve this $400. I never even said I was giving you anything.
Yep. That's it. To a T.
Yeah, Joe, if you're listening, you owe me $2,000. Pay up.
Joe, if you're listening, you got to reread Capital, bud, because you missed some of the high points.
You're making my faith in Marxist-Bidenism really waver here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a deeply flawed. I'm more of a Biden Trotskyist than anything else.
Yeah, he's not walking back his promises. It's a continual revolution. He's just changing things as it goes along.
No, there's truth in that. Biden's promises are continually revolting.
All right, sorry to derail the conversation.
Anytime I can condemn Marxist Bidenism and praise Anarcho-Stalinism, I will hop on that. How many more times do I have to bring it up before it's funny again? Because I'm pretty sure I've killed this joke, but I think I can bring it back.
No, I mean, if you can cobble together some half-formed ideology that fits that definition after the fact, I mean, it'll continue to be a fun joke, I guess.
What's just going to be like every contemporary right-wing version of leftism, where it means whatever I say it means at the time. It's my easy out from now on.
Yeah, like postmodern neo-Marxism or whatever.
I'm not familiar with the concept, and I don't want to be.
That's Jordan Peterson's bugbear.
Wait, what is it now?
Oh, you mean cultural Marxism?
Yeah, that's the one they usually go to, is cultural Marxism.
Or yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, postmodern cultural Marxism, whatever he calls it, I forget.
Yeah, it's word salad. And people are like, "Oh, did you see how smart they are?" And you're like, "Can you define what any of this means?" And they're like, "Well," and you're like, "Yeah, you can't."
Yeah, postmodern neo-Marxism. It's the combination of Foucault, Marx, and Neo from The Matrix.
I mean, that almost makes sense.
What part of this isn't clicking for you? I don't have all day to explain this.
I'm sorry. I'll study up on my own time.
Yeah, and I'm actually really excited about the revisions to postmodern neo-Marxism now that they're making another Matrix movie.
Wait, are they making another Matrix movie?
Probably.
Oh, I heard about that. I don't understand why they're doing that, other than just money. But
well, you just explained the film industry, okay. So I can't help you much.
Yeah.
Hold on, I might be excited. I'll go see it. It might be bad, but
actually, while we're talking about film, Zach, if you had something else to say your piece. But we're actually about to get to the media wing of the league.
I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that the two people that wrote The Matrix are trans anarchists.
I did hear that.
I hope you all know that.
Are they anarchists?
They seem pretty cool. I just don't understand why they're making another Matrix movie.
I don't either. I don't think they're involved.
What could be more anarchist than
I don't think the original writers are involved.
What vein of anarchists? Are they anarchist scholars?
I don't know what their specific belief is.
They should really make a sequel to Speed Racer. I know that they
worth the shout out for sure.
Yeah, they got real mad at Trump for using the red pill meme, and they're like, basically, fuck you. That's a metaphor for trans issues, basically. Because I guess hormone pills are red or something. I don't know.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't.
Yeah, I heard that, which coming from the actual writers makes sense. When I think about it, I'm like, I mean, that's a very loose connection. You're like, oh, well, the old HRT pills were red, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not all that pill was. He saw a totally different fucking world after that.
Yeah.
Which I guess if I don't know. I thought there was a lot more said about society than just someone's outlook changing as a trans person, but I could be wrong, and maybe it was kind of both meanings. I don't know, but cool either way.
I'm thoroughly red pilled, but my red pill has a yellow hammer and sickle on it, so I'm okay. Let's take it back.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I meant take back the red pill, but that's a stupid idea, and I don't want to do that. No, but since we are talking about movies, we get to talk about Finally Got the News. Which I meant to tell you guys to watch, but I don't remember if I did.
No.
Okay, well, it can be hard to find because it keeps getting removed from YouTube, it seems. But in I think 69 or 70, the League was approached by a group from New York called Newsreel, and they were like revolutionary filmmaker types. I don't know a whole lot about them because they kind of seemed like dumb white idiots who were like, that I'm oversimplifying. Like, I'm sure that they had like some really good intentions in the way that many of us did when we didn't know anything and made stupid decisions. But yeah, so they approached the League about doing a documentary on them, and the League was not really into it because they were, at this point, I'm unclear on how secretive they were to begin with, because they were openly pamphleting outside of shops and things like that. I think that they had maybe fought with some infiltration issues. They were getting to be a little bit more secretive at this point. Or maybe the Rums were more open, but the actual League itself was being secretive. I'm really not sure. But John Watson, one of the founding members of Drum and one of the founders of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, was into the idea. So he convinced the other members of the executive board that it was a good idea, under the condition that they had a heavy hand in the filming and production and writing. Basically, they were allowing Newsreel to come in and do the documentary, but only under the strict guidance of the League. Which is honestly, like, I think that was the best way they could have done it. They did make a lot of good decisions because they learned a lot of skills in terms of editing and production and so on and so forth, and were able to be helpful and tell the story that they wanted told instead of a bunch of like film school revolutionaries who, had a lot of their own issues. And a lot of their own issues were like Drum and the League were sort of at odds with a lot of other revolutionaries in that era because they did want to. A lot of them did want to stick with in-plant organizing, and Newsreel was more in the Black Panther and Weather Underground school of thought, in that they were all about taking action and were proponents of violence, and that didn't always jive with the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. Ken Cockrell himself was openly condemning of that sort of rhetoric because it caused problems. Also, fun little fact is, you can criticize, them being like college kids or whatever at this point, because back in this era, there was a lot of contention between actual working people and underprivileged people and college students who were hopping onto revolutionary politics, but really didn't have a lot of firsthand experience and knowledge about what these people were going through. So one of the Newsreel guys was dedicated enough to this project that he went to jail for 10 years because he tried to fund it by smuggling hash. So,
all right,
wow,
credit to that fucking guy.
That's the Stalinist part of the anarcho-Stalinist ideology, right? I mean, because he funded the Bolsheviks by robbing banks.
Smuggling hash is more the anarcho part. Going to jail for it is the Stalinist part.
Okay.
So because Newsreel was pretty into the Black Panther Party, I don't know a whole lot about other stuff they did, but they had done documentary work for the Black Panther Party and Weather Underground as well. They were from New York, so I don't know how tight they were with the Weathermen, but that was sort of the line that they were pushing. And at some point there was a conference in Detroit that Newsreel went to, or maybe they hosted, called the Anti-Repression Conference. I think they actually hosted it. And they invited Ken Cockrell along with 2 Black Panther Party members. And so we're going to get into the split between the League and the Black Panther Party. They were never really on the same page. John Watson, who was, I've mentioned over and over again as a founding member of Drum and the League, was early on a Black Panther Party member, and he always tried to keep the two somewhat in line. And it never seems like, I never found anything to imply that they were like cutthroat at war with each other or anything, but they did not have the same approach or the same beliefs. And I don't really get it, because they actually would have worked really well together in tandem, but y'all know how splits among leftists can be.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. To me, I'm like, I feel like there's room for pretty much every one of these approaches. Everyone's got a point. That's why we can't agree, because everybody's kind of fucking right. Let's do all of them. Like, you guys were organizing the plants directly and in the community, and we'll kind of focus on the national stuff. You would think that maybe they could kind of do their own thing, but of course,
Dude, and
can't
you're
let
right.
anybody.
Because it
Yeah.
seems like the big difference between the League and the Black Panther Party was what the biggest issue at hand was. So
Yeah, and why not? You attack the issue that you think is the most important. We'll do the one that we think is most important, and ta-da! Both problems get attacked.
yeah,
Seems,
I
but
would love to find out more about this, and I feel like given how specific this information is, it might involve tracking down people who were like firsthand involved in the conflict. I don't fucking know. But the
yeah,
gist
I
of
mean,
it is, oh, what's up?
I was just gonna say, again, for us, it's hindsight is 2020, but we still struggle
Yeah,
with these same issues today.
I can't shit on them too much, man. These people were
Yeah,
doing real, like they were trying to organize conferences. There were countless organizations formed, and a lot of them seemed to be somewhat larger organizations. Like maybe they weren't hundreds of members, but they weren't, one or two people either. And I guess the formal split where they were officially no longer associated with each other in any shape, form, or fashion was because at the anti-repression conference, Ken Cockrell made a comment that criticized the Black Panther Party approach to everything and said that because they had played it safe and like not advocated violence and everything so much, and again, Ken Cockrell was the lawyer, the intellectual, and just really like good at legal shit. He at no point did any drum or any Revolutionary Union movement member ever go to jail or get killed.
Wow.
And that was
that's
Cockrell's
impressive.
specific criticism of the Black Panther Party. They were having members being killed and jailed on a regular basis, and the League was not having that problem.
I mean, that is a reasonable criticism. That's kind of looking at the facts and going, the record seems pretty clear. Which
it's a valid criticism, but I mean, you could also frame playing it safe as a valid criticism of the League.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said before, I think everybody kind of has a point, and that's why it's like, well, we can't agree because there isn't really a right answer here. So yeah, the valid criticism on both sides there.
I think you just defined Marxist-Bidenism for me, which is when you can see both sides.
And we should unify.
But no, like roughly speaking, the League played it safer. They were a bit less confrontational, and in general, they stuck specifically to workplace organizing. And because of that, they actually, as far as I could find, at no point did they ever have anyone killed or get sent to jail. Cockrell defended the shit out of everybody and did a good job doing it. And so a lot of people got fired, but they really never had a lot of legal issues. They had some, and Cockrell did have to defend some people, but they were relatively minor compared to the Black Panther Party.
Now, before we get too far, I was just going to ask more about, did they have much success to speak of? Like, did they actually get gains over these other unions where, like, they started to actually change, hey, workers got raise after raise after raise, or the safety issues were addressed promptly because of the threat of what the revolutionary unions were doing? Did they have much success to speak of, or was it like they were working really hard, but the results were tenuous at best?
So some of their bigger organizing successes, unfortunately, were early on. You probably forgot, but I went into it a little bit in the previous episode. They had some wildcat strikes that were thousands of people. They shut some plants down for a few days. And as far as I could tell, that did result in, at the very least, some superficial safety improvements. They combated some work speed ups.
Yeah, that's something. That's what I wanted to know. I'm sorry. I just couldn't remember.
Well, yeah. The book where I got a lot of my information from, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, was written in like 75. So there's a lot of postmortem work about this movement that could be done that isn't necessarily in this book. There are some updates, but they're not they're more about what happened later on and less about, what information has come out since that shows us one thing or the other. They formed and early on had some success, but it kind of went downhill. And I'm sure that there was some infiltration issues, but a lot of it, and this was another thing I was going to address, is the League was very confrontational and they refused to work with white people in a way where even a lot of the Black Panthers seemed more sympathetic to working with white people than the Rums did.
Which, I mean, that's something that kind of comes up, and like we understand kind of today where it's like, okay, yeah, that kind of didn't have a very good model for success. However, I kind of want to point out that, like, I feel like it's easy to kind of dismiss that looking back today, but really at the time, I mean, I kind of can't help but understand it, because the truth was you had actual like Klan members in other unions and stuff. It's like, well, working with white people, like the interests at that time were pretty divergent. So like,
well, but I mean, we're going to get into in a minute the Motor City Labor League and some other parallel organizations. There was a sense of black. There was a lot of black nationalism within the ranks of Drum. Like there were a lot of Marxists who were more about the labor struggle, but there were a lot of more nationalists oriented folks who it was not as much of a class issue as it was a race issue. So the general feel was, it was kind of like the Rainbow Coalition. They weren't condemning of white people. They were just saying, y'all do your thing, we'll do our thing. Like they wouldn't work with them, but they encouraged them to organize amongst themselves.
Yeah. Which, I mean, to me, I look back and I understand why black nationalism kind of stuff, which appears ugly when you look at it, but at the same time, it's like, I get why that happened. And really, I don't think that we ever could have avoided that tendency. Like, given the history and where things were at the time and how things were organized, it's like, it's easy to see now where it's like, oh yeah, that was of course a problem. But
I mean, there's a lot of flavors of black nationalism, and some of them don't seem that bad, and some of them are straight up abhorrent.
Well, sure, but then again, when you look back, you're like, well, even the ones that were pretty not great, you're kind of like, well, given the history, given what was going on, I kind of get it. Like, I get why that cropped up, and it's really easy to just like, oh, of course it was an issue, blah blah blah. They should have known better, but at the time, things were pretty fucking bad. And that history, I think, is just something that we get. Like, I don't think it could have developed any other way. Like that was always going to be part of it because of the history that preceded it. I don't think that there was ever like, we had people who were trying other approaches, of course, and they were sometimes successful, sometimes not. But like, I feel like we should understand that like some of this stuff that like, yeah, it's not pretty, but it existed for a reason. And it's hard to say like, oh, it was totally wrong, whatever. It's like, well, not from a person's perspective who kind of was part of that, I guess. It made a lot of sense. Like I can see why that was an issue in the ranks.
Their approach to black nationalism and the approach of that era, there's a lot of discussion I found in some documents from the time and some stuff that was written later on in the 70s that were talking about what nationalism robbed the movement of, but what it also contributed. It wasn't a strictly positive or negative. It was
that's kind of what I'm
of the movement.
That's what I'm getting at is, like we move past it today because we go, oh yeah, of course that like was a problem and blah blah blah. But like I feel like we have to take a step back and just go, there was a reason it was a problem, and it's not like you can just write off like, oh, those people were wrong. It's like, well, I mean, from their perspective, I mean, can you really blame them that much? So I just wanted to point that out as like there was a reason that was a difficult issue within these organizations. Like it existed for a reason, and it's hard to get rid of for a reason. Was all I was trying to get at.
Oh, and another one of the things I found, which will answer your question a little bit more, some of the stuff that I found that said that they think that the decline of the Revolutionary Union movement had a lot to do with its efficacy. They didn't have a lot of overt gains. There wasn't a lot and it honestly, it has a lot to do with how the state will never attribute any progress made to a violent organization. You don't want to say that something was effective. So the bosses didn't seem like they were giving a lot to the Revolutionary Union movements, but it did seem like they had an impact, because a lot of people said that declining membership in the later years had a lot to do with the fact that there was just less stuff that people were pissed off about. So,
interesting. Yeah. So they were kind of impacting the other unions. Like, it made sense to give to the less radical demands, because you'd rather deal with them than the rum movements.
Well, that's the thing, though. They were radicals in speech and politics, but their demands were the same things that the UAW would have been arguing for 30 years earlier, before they became very much, on the same page as management. They were, by and large, everything I have found said that what they wanted were safer work conditions. I didn't find a lot of demands for more money, except in the form of, we want to make the same amount that we're making now working fewer hours. Because at the time, there was a lot of compulsory overtime, a lot of 7-day weeks. And when you implement a speed up on the production line and everybody's working 7 days a week at 20% faster rate, that's a safety hazard. You have everybody exhausted all the fucking time, and they make mistakes, and they get hurt, and they lose fingers and hands and arms, and they fucking die. And when you compound that with equipment that was under-maintained or, being pushed past its limits, these were the things that they were fighting for. Like, they might have been a Revolutionary Union movement, but they were fighting for very reasonable fucking demands.
Yeah.
The most revolutionary, quote-unquote, thing that I found that they ever demanded was 40 hours pay for 30 hours work, which is an obvious echo of the classic 40 hours pay for 60 hours work or whatever. Like, they wanted their fair share of the pie. They did act, like, openly say they didn't care if the company made a fucking dime, because they were the ones doing the work and they wanted the pay. But in terms of actual demands, no, they were pretty fucking reasonable. We don't want to die on the job. We want to make enough money to support us and our families.
Yeah, very reasonable. It doesn't. Yeah, I'm with you there.
I got a little ahead of myself, though. Really, I was just comparing like the sort of tonal differences between the League and the Black Panther Party, and what it really boiled down to was the League wanted to remain smaller scale. Even if they became a more national organization, they largely wanted to stay in the workplace. And the Black Panther Party,
sure,
they weren't even just a national organization. They wanted to be international. They allied themselves with every revolutionary movement across the world, and they were more into social organizing, and they were bigger advocates of violence than the League ever was. I saw this, there was one article I found that summed it up as the Black Panther Party saw the primary enemy as the cops, and the League saw the primary enemy as the boss. And that was the best that I can see it put. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Connor. Like, there's no fucking reason I can't hate both of those people. I hate my boss and I hate pigs. So, let's... maybe you don't want to split your resources fighting them, but they're both the enemy.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, we're saying that like, oh, well, there was this split, but it kind of seems like there just really didn't have to be, because it's like, well, you didn't really have to be affiliated with each other anyway. I mean,
and again, I don't really know how contentious of a split it was. I kind of think Ken Cockrell criticized the Black Panther Party, and the Black Panther Party was kind of already iffy on the League, so they were just kind of like, all right, we're not working together. We're not the same.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I never saw anything to indicate that there was genuine animosity between the organizations. Later on, there was still even some Black Panther Party, like former Black Panther Party members, that did some organizing after the end of the League, along with League members.
Yeah.
But this was all like a huge aside, because that the newsreel place that were making the documentary on Drum had that conference, and that was why I brought up the whole fucking split.
Yeah.
So they start filming a documentary about the League, and there's a lot of League involvement. They have people learning to operate cameras and all of the equipment and do editing and film development, so on and so forth. And it honestly it was good. Like, these folks did a lot of solid fucking work. They newsreel wanted to make a movie, and John Watson found an excuse to have his people learn a lot from it. But I forget what happened. The newsreel fucking fell apart. There was a lot of problems with them supporting. The most adversarial stuff I saw between the League and the Black Panther Party involved newsreel, and purely just because of newsreel. A lot of the members showed up in Detroit. They were from New York, and they started like supporting the Detroit Black Panther Party and advocating for violence. And the League was like, slow your fucking roll. Like, we're not on board with that. They hit some financial trouble, and newsreel was about to hand over their equipment to this other organization, I think in Ann Arbor. And John Watson said, nah, fuck that. This equipment's ours now. He seized the means of film production.
So they just took all the cameras and stuff?
Yeah. Like, he just took all their equipment away from them. Like, they were done, but they were going to like try and pay off some debts by handing over the equipment. And at that point, the League was like, actually, you owe us too, so we're just taking your equipment. And John Watson founded Black Star Productions using all of that equipment. And like, it never became a huge thing. Like, it never seemed well organized. But they did some stuff. Under Black Star, they finished the production of their film, Finally Got the News. That's what it's called. Sometimes you seem to be able to find it on YouTube. Sometimes you can't. Last I looked, there was a German subtitled version that was fine. It was weird because you have to have the German subtitles, but it's good. It gets the point across. I recommend it if you are into, seeing, like, if you're the kind of person that likes looking up Fred Hampton clips and seeing folks just espousing revolutionary rhetoric. That's a lot of what it is, and it's fun.
That does sound really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an Oscar winning movie or anything, but it's definitely fucking entertaining and worth the watch. So yeah, John Watson founded Black Star, and he kind of like got really into film production. He did bring along some of the newsreel people. I guess they weren't all idiots or whatever. I don't know. They didn't really talk a lot about him. But Watson used this as an excuse to go travel Europe to sell copies, sell distribution rights or whatever. I don't know how the film world works. He didn't do great. The coolest thing that I found was that they did manage to sell a copy of Finally Got the News to the Italian Communist Party.
Nice.
The fucking Italians love their leftism. It's also their fascism. I don't know. It's a conflicted country. They love spaghetti.
I feel like, you know what? That seems to be the case everywhere. It's always conflicted. Whenever you start to see like, oh, socialism getting popular, so is fascism. Almost anywhere in the world you look, at least from what I'm seeing, the two go hand in hand. Unfortunate. Like, things polarize more and more on each side, and that's how you get either one. And it's just a constant battle between the two. Like in Central and South America, it feels like it's constantly switching between socialist and fascist governments.
And that's why I'm hoping that America can finally form some socialism to combat our fascism.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Right now, the other side's winning, unfortunately.
And I mean, a lot of the stuff in Italy was like the connection of like the CIA, the mafia, the Catholic Church at some point. They were all working together to make fascism at some point or another, whether they knew it or not. Yeah, so fun stuff. Look up Operation Gladio if you're curious.
Oh, there's no, not Gladio. God damn it. Oh, that's just so much.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to like feel like conspiracy theories are real, just start reading about that and and then you'll be ranting unhinged rants at your coworkers about JFK.
Dude, if you
in
really
no
want
time.
to feel like or if you really want to feel like conspiracy theories are real, you don't need Gladio. You can literally look at like almost anything the U.S. has done for 100 years.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah, pretty much.
Operation Gladio, Operation Paperclip, Operation Condor, fucking COINTELPRO. I guess that was the FBI.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'll lump
we're
it in
not
there.
in short supply of conspiracy theories that were well documented to be true.
Yep.
All right, so that's pretty much all I had to say about Black Star. That was John Watson's baby, and we're gonna touch base on why it became a problem in a second. But I wanted to talk about Mike Camlin's. He's one of the other founding members of Drum and the League. I actually thought his contribution was a little bit cooler in terms of community outreach. Like, this is the point where when the League is formed, it becomes, like I said, there was a split between people who wanted to stick with in-plant organizing and people who wanted to spread out into the community. And a lot of the founding Drum members seemed to be the ones who were trying to push out into the community, while a lot of the rank and file members were like, no, this is our thing, and we want it to represent us. Both valid, but Mike Hamlin started a reading group, which the highest number I saw in attendance was at one point they had 800 members of their fucking reading group.
That's a reading. That's
Yeah.
a reading. I don't even know what to call that. That's no reading group though.
Dude, they would organize it to, like, I think that there were multiple meetings a week, and they would organize it in smaller groups for each meeting. So they would have somebody to lead the discussion over whatever they were reading that week. And dude, it sounded like it was big, and it lasted a long time. It outlasted the League.
Huh. All right.
Cool.
But like, it was a little bit less. I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but they welcomed anybody to come. It wasn't just Drum members or anybody. It was a community outreach thing, and it was interracial. They weren't trying to say that this was also a black only organization. He wanted to spread the word of revolution to the people. You know, God fucking bless him. And really, the only criticism that I found, valid, sure, but whatever, was that it wasn't doing anything to improve the material conditions of the workers. But you could even criticize that as saying that waking people up and bringing them into your ranks will improve the condition of your workers. But
yeah, I would argue that propaganda and education are incredibly important. Like,
it was less direct, and a lot of people were concerned about, like, you know, going to work tomorrow, not raising awareness over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
But the reading group allowed them to develop ties or offshoots with a lot of other groups. Like I said before, they were kind of taking a rainbow coalition approach where they wanted other organizations to organize other groups of people. The big one that I found was the Motor City Labor League. This one was a genuinely Marxist-Leninist organization. I can't make out a whole lot. Like, you can find a lot of documents from them online, and I can't make a lot of some of it because they are so Marxist-Leninist that it's funny. Like, they constantly talk about if you've read any Lenin, you'll get this. They constantly talk about how, like, so-and-so is an opportunist and this person is an opportunist. And I cannot find it again for the life of me, but I'm almost certain that in one of their releases, they refer to somebody as a Kautskyite.
So they call people Philistines also?
We are in yes, they do use that. Like, they use such overtly, like, cut and paste Leninist rhetoric. It's just, it was hard to take seriously because I'm like, I feel like you read Lenin but didn't really think about anything you just read. Like, these guys are in 1970s Detroit trying to overthrow the Tsar.
God damn you, George Romney.
Their heart's in the right place, but
they're still arguing with Kautsky.
Yeah. Okay, I won't swear that they called somebody a Kautskyite because I have actively been reading Lenin, so maybe I fucking mixed some stuff up. But they use overtly, like, Leninist phrases. It's funny.
Now I'm just.
But these guys, as best as I could tell, they were the.
I'm imagining them walking across the frozen Detroit River to storm the Winter Palace of George Romney.
Dude. Not far from it, probably. A couple of things to be said about the Motor City Labor League, because they look like they were the other big group from this era. I couldn't find as much writing about them, but, you know, the only reason that we probably know as much about the drums and the league as we do is that somebody wrote a book about it in like 1975. All I could really find about the Motor City Labor League was either from the book Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, where it's kind of talked about tangentially, or you can find some of the releases on various leftist websites that the Labor League released. They seem to outlast the league. They lasted into the mid-70s or longer, as far as I can tell. I'm not 100% sure, because, like I said, there's not a ton of information that I found. They had more women in leadership roles. That seemed awesome.
Compared to like other organizations, or just a majority of women?
Yeah, well, the league and some of the offshoot organizations had a tendency to really espouse the importance of equality between races and sexes and everything, but not do as much to actually advance those roles.
Okay.
So what was the, I mean, was there a lot of female auto workers at the time? Were they underrepresented compared to the amount of just total workers in those plants? Was it just a matter of we're getting workers from these plants into this union movement, and most of the people who work in these plants are men, or was it more so them just not actually doing what they said and not bringing?
I read plenty that indicated that there were a lot of female workers. My impression was that they were employed in more stereotypically female roles at the time.
Okay.
Like maybe they were secretaries or, you know, the office gopher or whatever, but like less production floor, but still with representation on the production floor. Like I read many accounts. One of the things that some female manufacturing people expressed discontent with was that like if you were a woman or a black woman in these plants, your complaints were taken even less seriously than anyone else's, you know? So that they I don't know to what extent they were represented on the actual factory floors, but they were there.
Okay.
So they really did deserve good, you know, well, of course they did, but they clearly had a presence and they deserve more representation even in the revolutionary unions, which again said, hey, we want more equality, but like weren't needed a little bit of an extra nudge to like, hey, that means more women in leadership here.
Yeah, I mean, like, really, there's only one woman, and she's next on the fucking list that I could find that played any larger role in all of this, and I don't even think she worked in one of the factories. She just worked in one of the other groups that seemed to spawn off of the reading group. So, like, you know, I think even if there weren't a ton of women on the actual factory floor, there were still enough women working in the factories and working in the offices and so on and so forth that they deserved representation, you know, because sexual harassment is an issue now and pay discrepancies are an issue now. Imagine what they were 50 fucking years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 10 times
It
worse.
just goes to show, like, any organization, any union movement that is fighting for, you know, equality and you know, better working conditions still can fall victim to the, you know, standard societal norms of underrepresenting, you know, one group or another, whether it be women or any other group.
Well, it was sadly more than just underrepresentation, but
Yeah.
To finish up with the Motor City Labor League real quick, they actually had an official newspaper, and I couldn't figure out the appropriate joke to make here, but their newspaper was called Journey, so I can only assume that they were born and raised in South Detroit.
Yay! Oh, that was good.
Yeah, it was the best I could come up with, because when I found out that there was a fucking radical newspaper called Journey in Detroit, I'm like,
You know,
I gotta do something here.
Yeah.
fun fact: there is no South Detroit. I mean, south of Detroit is Windsor, Ontario. This is something my dad always brings up whenever that song plays on the radio.
No, I actually know about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they just chose that because it sounded cool in the song, you know?
No, they literally only chose it because it sounded good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Motor City Labor League, they were kind of all over the place. Like, by their own admission, early on, they didn't really have the best understanding of Marxist-Leninist ideals. And so they restructured themselves over the years to try to to better adhere to like democratic centralist principles. But they were sort of all over the place. Like, here in a single sentence, I saw them express issue with quote unquote opportunists, revisionists, anti-Stalinists, Trotskyists, and complained about the revisionist ideas of CPUSA, Communist Party of America. And granted, by the 70s, the CPUSA was a fucking joke, but like they really were adhering to the age-old leftist principle of shit-talking everyone they could think of.
Well, isn't anti-Stalinist and anti? Oh, I'm having a brain fart. Trotskyist. Isn't that like you're like, well, that's just everybody at that point, or is it not?
I don't know. Were they?
Well, no, they complained about anti-Stalinists and Trotskyists. So
yeah. So those are I guess they're somewhat
that
separate,
goes hand.
But...
Like, you know, a lot of Trotskyists aren't big fans of Stalin. Really, not a lot of people are big fans of Stalin, except for people who know the real Stalin. Solid fucking dude there. Do I need to back down on the Stalin shit?
I don't know.
Because I'm not going to.
It's fun if nothing else.
Actually, if you guys complain about the Stalinist shit, I'm going to put you in the fucking gulag. Any complaints? That's what I thought.
No, comrade.
Okay, I'm going to keep going with more organizations, because some of these are great and some of these are hilariously stupid. Another group that formed out of the book club was called People Against Racism. It was created by a dude, Frank Joyce. And really, he seemed like a solid dude who was putting forth a genuine effort to improve the material conditions of the people around him. He had experience organizing in the past, and so he was able to connect a lot of national movements with Detroit local organizations. And I believe this dude was a lawyer or some sort of lawyer adjacent profession. He aided in the trial of the Chicago 7. So,
okay.
You know, this dude gets a pass. He seems solid. I got no overt criticisms of him.
By the way, real quick, I was going to say, if anyone has watched the recent movie about the Chicago 7 and Abby Hoffman,
I refuse to on principle.
Yeah, it is not accurate from what I understand. It's who was the guy that made that movie? The West Wing guy. What's his name?
The fact that the guy who made The West Wing made a movie about the Chicago 7 was all I needed to hear to not watch it.
Yeah, no, real centrist lib guy. Check out the Dollop did much better. I think it was like a 3-part series on Abby Hoffman that goes into a lot better detail of, you know, how he was much more of a revolutionary than a, you know, boring lib, basically.
I feel like they painted a really pretty picture of Abby Hoffman, and that's fine. The Yippies were kind of a joke to me. I get that they had some solid ideals, but I don't feel like they had any very good tactics.
Yeah, I won't disagree with you on that. But
yeah, I mean, I appreciate that back then there was just a lot of organizations that were trying to do like something, anything. But yeah, I kind of think of the Yippies as sort of a fucking joke.
Well, and a lot of the ones that survived all turned into like investment bankers and stuff too, so they're not the greatest.
There's a couple of solid ones that made it out.
Yeah.
Not being total scumbags, but yeah, most of them went full boomer and just managed to profit off of whatever they had done. All right, I'm gonna keep going here.
Yeah, sorry.
Next, as I kind of alluded to earlier, we have ad hoc. This one's kind of cool. There was a police task force in Detroit around this time called STRESS. It stood for Stop Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets. And honestly, this is going to come as a big surprise to anyone who is familiar with the police, but they were not good.
Interesting.
Fascinating, I know. They had like as best as like I didn't do too much of a deep dive on stress, but everyone like this was not a well-liked group. It seemed like a big part of their MO was to like set people up and create situations where maybe somebody would get robbed and just make themselves look like targets so that they could bust whoever tried to rob them. But the instances of violence and murder that stress like experience were just off the charts for the Detroit Police Department at the time. Like in their relatively short lifespan, they had dozens of like cop-related murders, tons of issues of violence, and really it was a thing that the police were doing for whatever fucking reason to try and look busy and whatever. But they were just shitbags. Ad hoc was an early cop watch. Their whole thing was monitoring cops and trying to like keep track of instances of police violence. And honestly, like without being able to find a ton of information about them, they seemed fucking solid. The lady who founded Ad Hoc was a lady named Sheila Murphy, and her background was kind of cool. She was of Irish American descent. I think she was like second or third generation Irish. Her dad was a fucking Catholic anarchist from like the 40s and 50s. It worked on a Catholic anarchist newspaper called the Catholic Worker. As best as
the
I
Catholic
can find,
Worker. Yeah.
Do you know it?
Yeah. I've come across him before.
I was surprised. I only learned this weekend that fucker's still in print.
Yeah, and they did a lot of anti-war stuff, and I mean, they have always been like one of the most hardcore leftist groups out there. Like you're like, holy shit, you broke into what? Like they'll break into like, oh, we'll break into a fucking nuclear weapons facility, and you're just like, oh, okay, shit, all right,
no shit, that's fucking awesome.
Yep. So the Catholic Worker, yeah,
well,
pretty legit.
The lady who formed Ad Hoc, her dad was he worked for the Catholic Worker in like the 50s, and apparently was a Catholic fucking anarchist for the duration of his life. That's where she picked up her fucking ideals from.
Cool,
very
her
cool.
Ideals kind of became a bit reformist later on. I have a whole section of all of the reformists that come out of this, but yeah, that's Ad Hoc. Now we're gonna get to the one that I don't know. I strictly put it on here to make fun of the White Panthers.
Oh, this sounds real bad.
It's not real bad. It's just real dumb.
Okay.
There was John Sinclair, who I think was like a somewhat well-known poet or whatever. He was the manager for the for the MC5. He was part of the Yippies. Honestly, everything that I could tell about the dude, he seemed well-intentioned, but genuinely stupid.
I can identify with that.
Yeah, like it's okay. Just to put this out there, if I say to you that there's an organization called the White Panthers, what's your first inclination as to what that group is about?
I don't know. Sounds kind of like Blue Lives Matter.
Yeah, if you're guessing that they sound like a white supremacist organization, you're making the same guess that a lot of people did in the 70s. Apparently,
that's good marketing.
Apparently, this dude had the constant burden of having to explain to people that he wasn't a white supremacist. Which, I don't know. The whole thing seems pretty poorly thought out. Whatever. To his credit, as best as I can tell from when he was a Yippie, he did bomb a CIA office in Ann Arbor.
All right.
I mean, that's something.
Yeah, except that now we're going to get into some more background knowledge that, like, this actually would have required some real digging to find if I hadn't already been a big fan of Donald Cox's autobiography. So Donald Cox was the field marshal for the Black Panther Party for years, and there was a while when he was in exile in Algiers with the more famous Black Panther Party member, Eldridge Cleaver. So in Donald Cox's autobiography, there is a story where, like, I forget where allabouts they were traveling. I loaned out my copy of the autobiography, so I couldn't reference it. But they like talk about how John Sinclair shows up in Algiers because he's on the run after the CIA announced that they were looking for, or not the CIA, the police announced that they were looking for him in relation to the bombing of the CIA office. And Donald Cox's depiction of John Sinclair is even dumber than I have portrayed him. He sounds like a dude who really just wanted to kind of cause havoc. Like, he was probably well-intentioned, but he just kept getting high and disappearing and causing, like, you got to figure, in Algiers, it was a safe spot for a lot of revolutionaries who were on the run. It was similar to Cuba at the time. Like, a lot of Black Panther Party members fled to Cuba, fled to Algiers, and they had a fucking, like, not an office. What am I thinking of? Where you have diplomats
Like
and
an
shit.
embassy of sorts? An embassy?
An embassy. Yeah, I think that they had like their own small embassy in Algiers because the government was friendly towards revolutionaries who were, seeking asylum. But towards the end of that, they were kind of getting on rocky grounds, and Sinclair was just a fucking problem. So, yeah, you can read Donald Cox's autobiography. I am not going to say the name of it because I'm white and it has words in it. But it's a fucking great read. It's a really easy read, so, if you get a chance, pick that up. It's cool.
We don't think you fight fire with fire, bitch. We think you fight fire with water, bitch. We gonna fight racism, not with racism, but we gonna fight with solidarity. We said we're not gonna fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we going to fight with socialism.
Amazingly, or not so amazingly, Cuba's crime rate is one of the lowest in the entire hemispheres. Oddly enough, it seems that when people have their basic human needs met, they're less likely to commit crimes.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
The free market mythology, it argues that the most ruthless, selfish, opportunistic, greedy, calculating plunderers, applying the most heartless measures in cold-blooded pursuit of corporate interest and wealth accumulation, will produce the best results for all of us. Through something called the invisible hand.
What are you smiling about?
Dude, I almost had you.